Dr. Marshall, what I'd like to start off with is first to ask you about digestion. Digestion is such an important part of health. You have to get those nutrients, they have to be synthesized, and so many people are having digestion problems. That's why so much money is spent on antacids. Maybe you could start by telling us why we have such a problem and what we can do to fix it.
Well, thank you, Al. First of all, I think that digestion is the number 2 problem. We're going to get to the number 1 problem in a minute, which is minerals. But throughout the world, we as humans are one form of mammal. All mammals have been meant to be fed raw food. And we have cooked food. And I by no means propose you go to raw food, but I would say that there's considerable study to urge you to assist your own digestion. And perhaps the most important aspect would be your stomach and producing and relieving the stomach of the job of producing hydrochloric acid at each and every meal. Millions of Americans and millions of people around the world endure acid indigestion. Acid indigestion means that the food was not digested. You could not produce adequate hydrochloric acid, so the food sat in your stomach rotting, and it forms lactic acid. This burns just like hydrochloric acid, and if you take an antacid, the burning stops. So most people think that's good, but it's really terrible, because when you take that antacid, the food in the stomach now will rot all the way through the intestinal tract, disordering your normal bacterial ecology, which is critical for you to make B vitamins and other life-essential compounds. The rotting food will not be absorbed. In fact, the liver will try to inhibit its absorption, so it'll typically move on to the large intestine, where most people will absorb and store it as fat. What a really non-desirable outcome. So digestion, in my opinion, becomes one of the key things you can do for great health and long life. We also know that if you don't have adequate hydrochloric acid, eating certain foods may contain bacteria or other compounds that are not killed because you didn't have the HCl, and now have carte blanche to your circulatory system, your kidneys, your pancreas, and elsewhere in the body. So I would urge you not to eat another cooked food meal without supporting digestion if you're over 30.
Thank you. And how does this kind of digestion problem affect people who over time become diabetic? Is that a precursor to why some people become diabetic? We have such an epidemic of diabetes in America.
In addition to the overconsumption of carbohydrate, especially carbohydrates are a class for all sugars. A complex carbohydrate is one that has a long chain of sugars. Table sugar is a very short chain. So the consumption of these sugars in any form in excess can lead to a problem. Now, obviously, if we're consuming complex carbohydrates, their release into your blood is slower, so it doesn't create the same spiking, which is clinically associated with prediabetes or diabetes. So they are better, but overconsumption of sugars is one of the main issues. The other issue has to be the bacterial exposure when we're unable to digest our food.
And the lack of the synthesization of certain vitamins
Well, that's one of the when you don't digest your food well, then the rotting food feeds the bacteria. In your intestines, you have beneficial and potentially harmful organisms that are maintained in a symbiotic balance so that you can have all the compounds, their end chain products. If we have rotting food, we allow the potentially harmful organisms to overgrow and overwhelm the beneficial organisms and create an imbalance which could lead to infection and other disease.
Thank you. Now, in terms of sourcing the products that can have great efficacy for digestion, what options do people have, and what is the best model that you would recommend?
Well, there are many sources. You can get tablets or capsules. Some people will find hydrochloric acid mixed with pancreatic enzymes. Just as a quick primer, the food comes into your stomach. The stomach needs to make hydrochloric acid to break it down, but that hydrochloric acid is still not quite enough to break it down. So the body produces a catalyst called pepsin. This makes the stomach look like it's a lot hotter. It makes it mimic 160-degree temperature so that the hydrochloric acid can really break down the proteins into building blocks called amino acids. Now this food is meant to leave your stomach and go in the small intestine. In the small intestine, the dump from the stomach should have been acid. When it was acid, it will trigger the pancreas to release enzymes to further digest that food. Amylase for fats, protease for protein, and lipase for fats, amylase for starches. So these three enzymes are produced in the pancreas to further digest the food. Okay? And when the dump from the stomach is not acid, the pancreas may or may not release its enzymes. So you can see if we're low in hydrochloric acid, all the way down we'll have a cascade of poorly digested food. And this can lead to waste products building in the bloodstream. It can disturb sleep. It can imbalance all of your B vitamins. In other words, it just can start making a cascade of nightmares. So they'll have tablets out there, but the tablet will, in addition to many chemicals you really don't want from the tablet, the mixture of hydrochloric acid with pancreatic enzymes often will mean over time a breakdown of the pancreatic enzymes at the exposure to the HCl. Tablets also are unreliably released in the stomach or in the intestine. Sometimes they go in one end, come out the other. So tablets are probably the least desirable. The next thing would be a vegetable capsule, a gelatin capsule, but these can kind of glue up the intestine if you get too many of them, and they're really not as effective as a vegetable capsule. So now, if we were to have a vegetable capsule, we would want to separate hydrochloric acid from the catalyst pepsin and the pancreatic enzymes amylase, protease, and lipase. So having a separate capsule of the enzymes, which you take at the start of the meal, and then hydrochloric acid, which you take at the end of the meal, seems to work the very, very best. And we have done energetic and physical testing, and that is our outcome. So the best thing you could do is get these enzymes separated, and then you would want plant-based enzymes, so you don't have the contaminants that you would get if you extracted these from an animal. Finally, HCl, betaine hydrochloride, is one of the most underrated and most important enzymes the body ever produces for three reasons. First of all, without it, you cannot digest your food. So every time you eat after about age 60, you are producing at most 23% of the hydrochloric acid you made at 18. At 75, you're producing 0. So living beyond 75 is really a question of how good was the gut ecology, how long will it take for the rotting food to overtake it, 5 years, 10 years? So the really smart thing is that if you're eating cooked food, to begin taking digestive enzymes as early as 25, so that you can preserve the capacity to digest. But that's only one aspect. The second aspect, which is so important of hydrochloric acid, is that it's also known as trimethylglycine. This means betaine hydrochloride as trimethylglycine is the ultimate methyl donor. Now, many aging physicians have said that the main way we age and die is we demethylate. So we're eating the cooked food, so we're constantly surrendering our methyl groups. pretty soon as we do this, when we hit only about 1/3 of the methyl groups, the cell has to die. So we know that diseases such as cancer, certain viruses, are actually encoded in our gene deck. And by a demethylation episode, we may express these potentially dangerous genes. But if we maintained healthy methyl groups throughout our life, we could perhaps even do some remethylation. So 1 is digestion, 2 is immunity, and 3, which is amazing, would be anti-aging, but there's even a 4th quality, and that is the quality of life as you age. There's a study in Medical Hypothesis, 1998, that showed that when you eat cooked food, you lose 1,800 methyl groups per day per cell. Raw food, 1,200. But what I propose is that if you were to use hydrochloric acid properly, it's conceivable you would lose less than 1,200 even eating a cooked meal. So the lowly hydrochloric acid becomes a major anti-aging player, a major health issue, and we can see the loss of it is linked to every illness you can imagine in humanity.